Hello, children. It's been a while since I've done one of these. Sorry, haven't had a topic or haven't gotten around to doing it. So what's the topic today? Today, the topic is kind of professional disappointment and, how a lot of people right now, there's kind of an epidemic where people are super unsatisfied in their careers and they just feel directionless and kind of miserable because the working world hasn't been what they expected it to be. And I think part of the reason for this, yeah, there are a lot of jobs that aren't the most pleasant. And yeah, if you work for corporate America, that can be soul crushing. I've done it before, didn't enjoy it, but that doesn't mean that every career path that isn't being a social media influencer or a YouTube star or running your own business, being a professional athlete, being a professional musician, doesn't mean those are the only worthwhile career paths or the only ones that aren't miserable. So I think some of this is the way we frame this in our minds, and it starts early on in our culture. So one thing you'll hear a lot of people say is something along the lines of, if you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life. And while I think that's good advice to keep in the back of your mind and to try to kind of steer you down a career path that might be something you enjoy doing anyway, the reality is we can't all do that, right? There are certain jobs that just nobody's ever going to like doing, but they still need to be done. Like, be it treating sewage, picking up garbage, keeping streets clean. Those aren't inherently rewarding jobs for most people, but they definitely need to be done. Being a custodian at a school, for example, somebody's got to clean the place up. If you haven't noticed this, kids aren't like inherently really, really clean. So it's a super important job, and it's probably not one that most people are going to enjoy. So what I wanted to talk about today was just kind of separating the ideal from reality. And maybe if you walk into things with your eyes wide open, it's not as soul crushing. So again, reality is, so let's start with the ideal. Sure, I think it's worthwhile to think of some things that you love in their own right. Maybe you just love playing guitar or you love playing soccer. Yeah, I don't, when you're young and you're not married and you don't have kids, go all in on that stuff. Why not? Give it a try. See if it works. Then you'll never have to ask the question, what if? But the reality is only a tiny fraction of people will ever make it as professional athletes or musicians because it's something that a lot of people look up to right now. And so everybody kind of wants to do it. It's glamorous. You make a ton of money. Who wouldn't want that? So you got a ton of people competing for very, very, very few actual positions, right? There's 11 guys that can be on a soccer team, a professional soccer team, and start. That's, even if you add up all the professional soccer teams in the world, that's still a tiny, tiny fraction of the people on earth. So only the best will ever do it and make any money at it. So it's statistically unlikely that any individual who ends up watching this video is ever going to do that, even if they tried their hardest and went all in. But if you do, then you know that, hey, I tried it, it didn't work. And sometimes there are other careers that will open up as a result of it. So let's take soccer, for example. Let's say you get really super amazingly good at soccer and you get a full scholarship to college to play soccer. Well, that's pretty amazing. Most people don't get that. I would call that success, right? You get a free education out of it. You get to play soccer in college. But even if that happens, a tiny fraction of those people will go on to play professionally. So it's still really unlikely that you'll actually be able to make your living playing soccer. But what you might be able to do is make a living coaching soccer or being an announcer. So there are other career paths that might open up as a result of having tried that. And that maybe that wasn't your end game goal. your ultimate goal, but it still might be better than being a, I don't know, customer service rep. So even if you shoot for that really tough goal and you don't achieve it, you might find out that you still end up with a pretty great career out of it that scratches the itch, even if it's not exactly what you wanted. So step one, try the things you love, dedicate yourself to them, and see where that takes you. But it's also a good idea to have some kind of a backup plan, just in case things don't go exactly the way you hoped they would. Because the reality is, not everybody can be a pro soccer player. Not everybody can be a musician. Not everyone can be an influencer. Not everyone can own their own business, right? So let's take that angle. Let's say maybe it's not sports or music that you're interested in, but maybe you really enjoy landscaping, right? You like being outside and working with your hands, but you don't want to work for someone else. You want to work for yourself, right? Okay, great. But there are already a lot of landscaping businesses out there. So how are you going to get started? Well, one thing is you have to have some equipment, right? You probably need like a riding lawnmower if you're going to do this at scale and do it to an extent where you can actually support yourself off the money you're making. Okay, well, a riding lawnmower is not cheap. You have to find a way to buy that. Now you also need to get that from point A to point B, right? You're not just mowing the lawns that you can walk to or ride your lawnmower to. That's not going to make you enough money to support yourself. So you need something to tow that thing around in. Well, that's not a cheap car in most cases. You've got to buy a truck maybe. Trucks are expensive. So you see where I'm going with this. So just because you have something you enjoy doing and there could be a way to make money doing it, that doesn't mean you're going to be able to start your own business doing it. You might have to start out working for someone else. Well, that doesn't have to be a terrible thing. It doesn't have to be a soul-crushing thing. So, because one of the things that people don't talk about a ton when they talk about owning your own business is the fact that when you own your own business, you're kind of married to it. So like the buck stops at you. That means any problems that get escalated ultimately end up at your desk, and you have to be the one to handle it. And there's also a lot of time you probably spend thinking about your business and planning for the future. Well, if you're an employee, you don't have to deal with any of that. You just, when the day is done and your shift is over, you clock out, you leave. And you can turn your brain off from those problems. You can just go hang out with your family and your friends, and you're not on call. You don't need to deal with any issues that come up off the clock. You run the business, it's yours. Every problem is yours to figure out at the end of the day. So maybe it is okay to end up working for someone else. And that's not a bad thing, but we have to frame things accordingly. There's no, in life, it's very infrequent where there's something that's just the best answer and something that's just terrible. And there's nothing in between. Most of the time, life involves trade-offs, right? There's benefits of doing something and there's drawbacks to doing it. So the benefit of running your own business, yeah, you make more money. You have more freedom. It's your decisions that you get to make. You don't have to live with someone else's decisions. The drawback is it's yours. You're on the clock all the time. Every problem comes to you. You don't ever clock out. The responsibility is yours. The financial responsibility is yours, right? So if the bills aren't getting paid at the end of the day, depending on how you set up your business, they might be able to come after your personal assets too. So there's a lot of challenges there. So that's something that's worth keeping in mind. Finally, even if you had all of those resources and you were willing to make that sacrifice, the unfortunate reality is not everyone can run their own business, right? The market can be saturated for something. So if you live in a particular area and you wanted to start a brewery, right? That's been something I would have loved to do at points in my life. Well, what if you live in a town that's already got 4 breweries and you don't have that many people? Okay, well, you could move, I guess, but the area you're in is already kind of taken care of. So if you started a brewery, unless your beer is just way better than everyone else's, the chances of you succeeding are pretty low because there's already these established businesses that people are already used to going to. They know what food they like at that brewery. They know what beer they like at that brewery. Or are they going to take the risk on spending their money and not liking yours? Maybe, maybe not. And at the end of the day, there are just some people who are going to end up working for somebody else. So setting that up and framing that in your mind as a failure is just not the best way to look at it. So for example, me, I sell advertising right now and I work for somebody else. But at the end of the day, when I want to take some time off, I can take time off. And I don't, okay, that's not entirely true. I do get contacted a lot after hours and outside of normal business hours and when I'm on vacation. But I'm also pretty decently compensated, right? I'm not making minimum wage here. I make a good enough living to own my own home, plan for retirement, all those things. Those aren't bad things. And I have some degree of flexibility with my hours. You know, I don't have to clock in every morning at 8 o'clock and clock out at 5 o'clock and clock out for my lunch break. There's a lot of flexibility built into that. So that's not all bad either. And I don't have any financial stake in this other than obviously getting paid for working. But if the magazine I sell ads for goes under, I can go work for a different magazine. I don't have to pay off their debts. I just leave, go work somewhere else. So I guess what I'm hoping you take away from this is that there's a lot of paths to success. You just have to really decide what success means to you, which things are the most important for you. And then don't let other people's ideas about this poison your reality. So don't, just because people are in your ear all the time saying, oh, you need to work for yourself, or, oh, you need to go all in on being a professional athlete or musician, or your life's going to be miserable drudgery working for someone else. Like that's their perception. You need to develop your own. You need to figure out what qualities of life make your life the most rewarding, and then find ways of making that living that hold true to what matters the most to you. So if flexibility is super important to you, and not having to be responsible for employees and hiring and firing people, it's okay to go work for somebody else. And as long as you find a job that the day-to-day tasks are something that, even if you don't find it super rewarding, it doesn't bother you, that's not a failure. That's a pretty decent life. There's a lot of people who would kill for that. So just keep things in perspective, and hopefully this has helped. Thanks.